Right. Would anyone like to just share? Jackie, would you like to just do a brief introduction and we can just go around? That's the benefit of you getting here early.
Yeah, no worries. My name is Jackie Albanus. I'm a clinical social worker, and I work here in Maryland for the University of Maryland, actually, in the sports psychology department.
Wonderful, wonderful. Do you see someone you can somewhat popcorn to, and they can that way everyone can kind of get touched?
Well, second in the Zoom was Michael, so I'll pop over to Michael, and we'll go in that kind of chronological order.
That's great.
What's up, everybody? I'm Mike Franco. I actually just was last working with Orlando Magic and was in the NBA and pro sports for like the last 6 years. So transitioning out of that and saw this email pop up. So I'm excited to learn about it, see what's going on in the. I dealt with a lot of guys in that young college age group, but it was in a different context. So I'm really excited to hear about what we got going on today.
Right. If you can pick somebody, Michael.
Let's go with who's next to me on the screen, Dr. Joan.
Hi, I'm Dr. Joan Steininger. I've been a member of ASP since 1993. So I'm the old timer. Um,
You're the
and
mature one with institutional knowledge.
thank you. I appreciate that, Lindsay. And
Mhm.
I've taught in universities and I've also had a private practice all along. And I'm currently writing my third book on female athletes, entitled, um, come on, Joan, titled Body, Mind, and Sport, Removing the Stigma of Mental Health from Female Athletes. So that's me.
Right. You select someone to go next?
Um, Dan.
Hey, good morning, everyone, or afternoon, depending on where you're at. I'm Dan Wilsey. I work at the Family Institute at Northwestern, and I am a sort of blending the clinical world and sports psychology together. So I see a range of athletes from youth to professional, Olympic athletes, and my man Lindsay was here putting this on, so I had to tune in. Let's
Thanks, Dan.
uh let's dive into, of course, let's dive into Lena.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. So excited to be here and learn more about this. I'm a psychologist in the athletic counseling department, the sports psych department at Pepperdine University.
Right. Thank you for your good weather.
Yes.
If you can select someone to go next.
Yes, let's go to Gia.
Hey everyone. Dan, I saw your name and I was like, that looks really familiar. I just got my master's in clinical counseling at the Family Institute at Northwestern a couple of years ago. And so now I'm working at a private practice in Chicago where half my caseload is sport and mental performance, other half is just general population. And I saw this email and was really excited to hop on because my capstone I did to graduate was on the impact of like NIL on like mental health for athletes. And it was just kind of putting feelers out there, creating some ideas. And so I was excited to attend this and just see how much it's changed just in the last 2 years too.
Right. If you can select someone,
Um,
Gia.
yeah. Has Nicole gone yet?
No, hi. Sorry, I came late, so I'm gonna have to guess who didn't go yet.
You're fine.
Okay, but I'm Nicole. I am recently in a new position at Northeastern University as a mental health counselor, specifically here to work with the student athletes. So Northeastern is, I'm hearing a lot about the NIL and the impact of it and changes constantly from my time as an athlete, very different. So I'm just excited to learn more so that I can best support the students here and supporting staffs. So thank you for putting this on.
No problem. If you could select someone. Thank you, Nicole.
Yes. Has Ingrid went?
No,
No, I
not
don't think
yet.
Ingrid is going.
Hi,
Oh,
my
okay.
name is Ingrid. I work with the tactical population right now. I used to work with college athletes, so this interested me to kind of keep that connection going.
Right.
All right, I guess we can go to Devin.
Hi, everyone. My name is Devin Love. I work at Pepperdine and I'm working with the student athletes here.
Thank you. Devin, you can select someone.
M. Sachs. I apologize if I mispronounced that.
Yes. Hi, Michael Sachs. I'm the real old timer. Joan is the young person in the group here.
Oh,
Um, I've been with AASP since 1887, I think. No, since 1986, since the beginning, and a retired professor from Temple University, and um, just very interested in the sport media in general, and topic today is fascinating one, and looking forward to learning from all of you. So thank you.
Thank you, Michael. If you can select someone to go next.
Sure. I'm not sure. Hannah Asafo, have you presented yet? Ajay? Sorry if I
Hi.
mispronounced it.
No, that's great. Hannah SPSEdge. Nice to see you all. If I pop off a video, it's because I have a toddler at home, so I'm multitasking. You don't want to see this chaos, but I'll be here and listening. So I work in the sports psychology field. I'm a mental performance consultant in Nashville, former collegiate and professional athlete, and I'm working toward my CMPC. So I'm interested in learning and listening and really my ear is sort of lent toward how can I help my clients who are in this space because it is new. It's not something I experienced personally, and I think it's important to be able to connect and help those student athletes.
Right. Before you go to toddler duty, if you could just select someone else.
Sure. Um, Josie, has Josie gone?
Oh, yes, I'm Josephine Perry. I'm a sports psychologist and I run a private practice in London, England. And I'm also on childcare duty because we have vacations here in the UK at the moment. So I'm just listening in.
Right.
I will pick Jessica. I'll pick Jessica.
I'm not sure if Jessica's there, but I can go as someone who's off video. I'm Chelsea. I'm a sports psychologist and CMPC at Children's National Hospital in Washington, D.C. I see a lot of athletes with injuries, concussions, returning to sport, and then just sort of generally. And I am in between clinic and trying to eat lunch. So that is why I'm not on video, but I will be here listening. And I'll pass it to, I don't think Marina's gone.
Hi, yeah, sorry, I'm also off camera because I'm simultaneously making lunch between sessions, but I'm excited to be here. I am also a sports psychologist. I'm in private practice in North Carolina. I see non-athletes and athletes, but my little niche area is perfectionistic, high-achieving women and girls. And I specialize in eating disorders. So I tend to see a lot of like youth athletes with eating disorders, and helping families navigate return to sport participation, as well as doing eating disorder treatment, which I provide. And then I see lots of college athletes, pre-professional and professional dancers as well. So excited to learn more about NIL. I've had a couple clients who have tried to, navigate this. So I want to make sure I'm armed with whatever I can to help. So thank you for putting this on.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who hasn't gone yet?
I can go. I am Hannah Lidke. I graduated from University of Western States with my master's in sport and performance psychology last year. And I'm now at a private practice in San Francisco, originally from Minnesota. So I've been here for the past 6 months now. And yeah, this is my second SIG meeting, and I really enjoyed the last one and got to know and meet a lot of really great people that have actually guided me a lot in this space, especially the private practice realm. And so I'm excited to keep learning from you guys and to keep meeting people. I will pass it to, I think I beat Dr. Eddie. So now he can go.
Yeah, you did. Well done. Dr. Eddie O'Connor, sports psychologist, recently moved to Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm serving through Atrium Health, their chief sports psychologist, as working with Charlotte FC, 2311 racing team, and Queen's University. And that's what's bringing me in, Lindsay, to hear about this topic with these D1 athletes. Is be very interesting. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. O'Connor. And if you didn't get what he said, 23 Racing is Michael Jordan's racing team. I got to pump you up, Dr. O'Connor. I appreciate your help over the years. Great, great. We have a few other people who haven't gone, just so we'll know who's here.
I can jump in. Hi, my name is Rihanna Karp. I also have a private practice. I'm all virtual right now. I'm working with mainly college athletes, mainly basketball actually right now, coincidentally. High school as well. And then I'm also starting with ODP with an Olympic development program for soccer. But it's cool that I can just kind of do everything virtually right now. I am based in North Carolina though. But yeah, I'm super excited to be here with you guys too. I also played college sports and NIL was not a thing, that being able to be more versed in it as I have more college athletes that I'm working with and high school coming up to college. I really want to be able to, I like the word armor myself. So appreciate you hosting this and it's nice to meet you guys.
Right. Is there a few other people who haven't been able to say hello yet? Okay. Okay. Well, that's fine. Well, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate everyone being here. My whole goal is not to be the voice you hear throughout this. I want to go through this presentation, and periodically I will stop and say, hey, let's talk about this and have some feedback. I do want everyone to feel that this is a safe place to be in, because we're dealing with a topic that is relatively new. So it's not like you're expected to know so much, but it'll be great to share some feedback. So I'm going to start and share my presentation at this point. And go from there. And before I forget, to Dr. Michelle Caroulas in her absence, if you look in the chat, there should be an opportunity for you to share an abstract for the upcoming AASP meeting, but I wanted to make sure I pass that along. So that should be available in the chat, and I can put it in there and a little later as well. She threatened me that if I didn't get it out to you guys, it'd be a problem. So I want the record to show I did put it out there. So I'll go. One thing I do when I share my presentations at times, I like to say whatever I may be sharing about my personal life is not to be braggadocious. It's trying to give insight to my experiences. I like to say that as a proud native Detroiter living in East Lansing now, the alumni of my sandbox were drug dealers, murderers, and college graduates. So when I tell my story, it's really talking about you kind of overcoming a lot of obstacles and happy to be in this situation. So I say that in advance going forward. So here we are, guys. A little bit back my background, about 30 years of experience as a teacher. I returned to my old high school to teach. As a coach, I returned to my old high school to coach basketball. Traveled the United States as well as Canada as a motivational speaker. Currently work as a lobbyist and a policy associate. My past role was deputy director for legislative affairs for the former governor Granholm, and work as a policy associate with a child welfare organization called Michigan's Children. I'm an author, wrote 2 books on athletes and charity, as well as mental toughness post-pandemic. Member of the media. I have media credentials to cover Michigan State basketball and football. You'll hear me talking a little bit about Coach Izzo. I was just with him yesterday, and they play Purdue tonight at home, but I'll be here with my daughter tonight. But I will see them when they play Michigan at Michigan Friday. So I'll be there. Sports psychology consultant, obviously, and a PhD candidate. And actually, my work is focused on athletes being able to maintain positive motivation and positive performance in the digital era of NIL, the transfer portal, and things like that. So I'm very committed to this work. And to go a little bit further as far as why I'm here, just to give a little bit deeper background, I've always been committed to a life of service. As a junior in college, I joined the Marine Corps as a reserve, and that had a major impact. And I'm always humbled and empowered to help. So I'm really committed in that regard. My passion complete, my skills include politics and business and public speaking, and education, sports, and charity. And I always tell people after I share this picture of the GOAT, Muhammad Ali, he's the only person I'll let rub on my head like that. And little thing, if you see the picture in the top right, you see me punching him. People got mad at me saying, Lindsay, why would you do that to him? And for the record, he took my hand and put it there. And my grandmother, my late grandmother, boxing aficionado, just like my mom, my great uncle sparred with Joe Louis. His name was John Sumlin. If you notice, my whole midsection is wide open, so he can give me a real serious blow to the gut. So that he was still setting me up at that time. So I always like to share that. So I had a great relationship with sports stakeholders. I talked about Tom Izzo. We had a great relationship over the years. It hasn't been fun. I mean, we've kind of gone back and forth, transitioning from an old school mentality to what you and I represent in this new age of sports psychology. And I think for him to continue to go along with this process, he's had to be able to evolve. That's Coach Mark Montgomery. He formerly was a assistant coach for Coach Izzo, but now he's the coach at Detroit Mercy. And I use these two to talk about the arc I've kind of experienced of old school coaching style and their perspective, as well as the new school. And Mark is very engaged in the NIL. And surprisingly enough, for those who would know enough about Coach Izzo, who just had 354 wins, becoming an all-time leader in the Big Ten, beating Bobby Knight, Robert Montgomery Knight, that is. He has actually come around to NIL. He just realized that is a part of the process, and he's come around to that. So we talk about these huge settlement deals. Actually, colleges are going to be getting about 20.5 million per program, per school in revenue sharing dollars. That's separate from the NIL. So I want to put that out there as we go into this. And these are the young people that we're talking about. I know many of you guys are working with D1 athletes. Over the summer, a brand that I'm closely involved with, the Moneyball Sportswear brand, it has a pro-am, and they're Michigan State basketball players as well as other college athletes to come out. And this is pretty much the starting five of Michigan State: Jackson Kohler, the top left, Jeremy Fears Jr. on the right, the human highlight reel, Flight 54 Cohen Carr, probably the most exciting basketball player in the nation to watch. Jaden Akins, I've been knowing that young man since high school. Jace Richardson, son of Jason Richardson, doing an outstanding job. Carson Cooper. So I'm having this dialogue and I have this relationship with these young people on a regular basis. But I wanted to put this out to kind of be one of the first places that we'll probably get a little feedback and stop. I mean, this is a ode to sports as we have known it. I mean, you see from the old school pictures of Wilt and Bill Russell to Muhammad Ali again, Kobe, Gibby, Kirk Gibson, that is, Mary Lou Retton, I mean, the Dream Team. And it begs the question of how many of us in the sports world are somewhat triggered. We are somewhat sports purists, and here we are right now with things changing a great deal. So I wish you all would humor me for this next request that I ask, is that if we can take a moment of silence for amateur sports as we have known it, if we could just take a moment, because I think what happens is there's this conflict between the way things have been and, like we're all saying, how things have changed so fast. So for a second, humor me, please. Just take a moment of silence for amateur sports as we've known it. Now, I appreciate that. So where are we at right now with NIL? And this is when I posed a question to the group. What are some thoughts as far as how you guys feel about where we are with NIL and what's taking place at this point? I'll kind of come back to the group. Think about seeing that picture with the athletes of old and where we're talking about now, where kids are getting all this money. I just want to be able to get some feedback as far as what do you guys think? There are no wrong answers, but your thoughts and feedback would be appreciated. Does anyone want to share any thoughts on that?
I'll share some thoughts
Thank you,
coming
Mike.
from working with those college age kids in a professional environment. It makes me feel like within the colleges, maybe it becomes more of that environment where it's like, okay, each player has kind of like their team around them. How can I maximize this money? And all these other questions kind of get in to their or thoughts and questions into their head around, myself as maybe a personal brand or however they want to frame it. And from a coach's standpoint and a team, and it takes away from the thoughts of winning at times. And not to say that not everyone wants to win, but like for me, that moment of silence was great because that was the college purist in me of like, we're trying to get to the next level. We're trying to win. We're trying to reach that next stage. And I can imagine, I haven't worked in the D1 population like that within schools, but I can imagine some of those same things happen as like the rookies and second, third year guys trying to hit their next contract in the NBA where I was working, and that clouds them so much. It's just like you can tell after they've had a conversation, their whole moods change with maybe they talk to their agent or something happened with the family around money. And so I think it just might cloud some things and present some new challenges within the team, the organization, or the school.
Wow, great, Mike. I appreciate that. Does anyone want to add or share to what Michael has shared on that? I thought that was pretty straightforward as far as the things that we're grappling with. Also, I want to add we're in a tough situation because as sports purists to a degree, we're asked to be somewhat non-biased because now your student athletes are going to be presenting these other things that they have going on. Not only are they recovering from an injury, not only are they dealing with maybe some personal issues, they have an NIL opportunity on the table. They have an opportunity to probably make more money in most cases than many who don't get the opportunity to play at the next level. So those are things to think about. Well, I appreciate that. I'm going to get back into it, and I'll be coming back to you guys in a second with a few more questions. Here we are. So what is NIL, if you will? NIL stands for name, image, and likeness, and has become the universal shorthand for college athletes' ability to become paid endorsers and monetize their success outside of their school-funded scholarships and benefits. Before July 1st, 2021, college athletes were not permitted to receive profits from their name, image, and likeness. They would end up, being disqualified and things like that. But here's where a lot of my old school folks really have an issue, and especially some of my old school coaches I deal with. Now we're talking about high school name, image, and likeness. That's right. This is not a typo. High school name, image, and likeness. And the reason why I think it's important that we include this in the conversation, because many of your client base are either collegiate level or coming right out of the high school level, or many of you guys may be serving clients. I have a whole high school that I support in the Metro Detroit area. So I don't know how familiar you all may have been, but if you look at the map, the vast majority of the United States has high school name, image, and likeness policies in place. Michigan is one of the states that we're working on, and I've been very closely in line with that. There's been a business case for high school NIL. This is a picture from the Mackinac Policy Conference, which every 4 years or so, it's a place where individuals come to talk about politics and business. Who you have on the left is former Michigan House Speaker Joe Tate, Robin Fralick, women's basketball coach for Michigan State, Coach Nightingale, the hockey coach for Michigan State, and Alan Haller, the athletic director. And they're talking about the business case to be made for high school NIL. Now, many of you all may know about Bryce Underwood. Bryce went to Belleville High School here in Michigan. I don't know why I'm making that face. We were having a good time, but I still don't know why I'm making that face. He's a $10 million man already. That's right, a high school athlete, freshly recruited. He flipped from LSU, as many of you may know, to go to Michigan for an offer of $10.5 million. Now, here's when we have to have a broader discussion, because there may be an assumption. I'm going to be very direct, because this is our tribe and we can talk like this. There may be an assumption that the majority and only opportunities for NIL are for young African American, Black or brown kids in the inner city. And that's not the case. Here we are. And I know we have Hannah, you're from Minnesota. We have Bayless Flynn. She became the first Minnesota high school student athlete to ink an NIL deal. Young white female soccer player got an NIL deal with a credit union. Now, why do I bring this up? Because this is showing you the broad swath of where NIL can be impacted, whether it's collegiate or high school. So this can be your client. This can be a young lady who's having a breakout season. She's getting these opportunities, and now she's also bringing that. So what I do want to do, one point I want to make is that this is not just about opportunities for inner city kids, opportunities for football and basketball. It can be very, very broad. And the work I've been doing will tell you more. Rep. Jimmy Wilson Jr., he was the author for House Bill 4816 here in Michigan, which was the high school NIL bill. And give a shout out to him because I worked very closely with him on that. Senator Sam Singh, the Senate Oversight Committee chair. And here's an image of myself and Lance Stone, who won Mr. PSL for Detroit Public Schools, and they just won the city championship Sunday. Great young man going to Detroit Mercy University to play basketball. But we were actually presenting to the Senate Oversight Committee on this issue about the impact of it. Now, because of some things in Michigan politics, the legislation didn't move, but the fact remains that this is something that's coming down the pike in all states and something we got to be ready for. So what I want to do before I take our next break is go through this bill, only to give you an idea of what some of the legislation sounds like, what it includes. Don't mean to bore you guys with a lot of legislative talk, but I just want to give you a concept. And this bill is kind of universal to many bills throughout the state. And then when I wrap up this part, I'll give you the key distinction between the high school and the collegiate level. There's a key distinction. So quickly, House Bill 4816 would create a new act, the Compensation of High School Athlete Act, to provide guidelines for high school student athletes and their ability to receive compensation for their name, image, and likeness. Specifically, the bill will prohibit high schools from upholding any rule, requirement, standard, or other limitation that prevents a student athlete of that high school from fully participating in high school athletics based on the student athlete earning compensation for their NIL rights. This bill would also prohibit a high school or any officer, director, or employee of a high school, including a coach or a member of the coaching staff or any other individual associated with the high school athletic department, from doing any of the following in regard to the student athlete's NIL or athletic reputation. Acts that are prohibited: identifying or otherwise assisting with opportunities for student athletes to earn compensation from the NIL department, meaning that a AD or a coach can't be the broker or the agent for an NIL opportunity. They can't be the agent as stated. Receive compensation from the student athlete or a third party for facilitating or enabling those opportunities. Attempting to influence the student athlete's high school enrollment or choice or professional representation related to those opportunities. Attempting to reduce the student athlete opportunities from competing third parties, meaning they can't block someone else from doing a deal with the student athlete, or attending any meetings at which a contract for compensation for those opportunities is negotiated or completed between the student athlete and the third party. So why is it important that I share this to this group? Because you may be privy to some of these things. You may be working with the athlete, you may be involved with the coach, and you may have to be the individual to say, hey, you may want to take a step back to make sure what you're doing is illegal and doesn't put this young person in a position where their future could be negatively impacted. The same as it relates to the collegiate level too. Now, this is one of the biggest parts that people try to get an understanding. What can you do and what can you not do? Allowable forms of NIL agreements are commercials, product endorsements, personal appearances, autograph sessions, merchandise or apparel sales, group licensing, acting as a social media influencer. But what are the prohibited forms of NIL? You guys may say, oh, this seems obvious, but things aren't always as obvious, and I think it's good to be stated, but this will give you an idea. An adult entertainment product or service, an alcohol product, a tobacco or electronic smoking product or device, a controlled substance, any form of gambling, including sports betting and horse racing, a weapon, firearm, or ammunition, a nutritional supplement. And also, a high school student athlete would be prohibited from entering into a written agreement or contract with a third party to earn NIL compensation if any of the following apply. The third party is an entity formed for the express purpose of receiving or pooling funds to provide NIL opportunities for student athletes. That is a collective. And I'm going to stop right there. Like I said, I wasn't going to go ad nauseum as far as with that. But that's the key point between high school NIL and college NIL, is that you cannot form a collective. That is a unique thing. What's a collective, Lindsay? A collective will be Mike, Dr. Jones, and Dr. O'Connor got together and formed, the AASP collective for any individual who was an alumni of that college or university to pool their money to be able to bring people in. And that's what's allowed on the collegiate level, but it's not allowed on the high school level. So I wanted you guys to get just a working understanding and a working knowledge for the most part. Every state is different, but the legislation in Michigan was pretty consistent with what was taking place throughout the country. And then once you hear what's allowable and what's prohibited, sounds like common sense, but you still get a pretty good idea of what's out there. A few more things I want to share that I want to better get some of you guys' feedback. So I'm going to move on from this slide, because once we say collective, we're pretty much okay with that. The transfer portal, are you in or out? That's another aspect that we have to deal with, because the NIL influences where a student athlete may go. Hey, this school is putting X amount of dollars on the table. When AJ Hogard, who played at Michigan State, had another year of eligibility, he went to Vanderbilt, and it was said he got about $1 million. I think it was about $900,000 to be exact. So the question is, many of your student athletes, as you guys know, will be faced with, am I going to hit the transfer portal? My suggestion to this body is talking to student athletes about what's your portal plan, meaning that, are you weighing the benefits of leaving or staying? What is your overall goal? How are these decisions going to impact your future? Because someone may say, hey, man, I'm about to get $1 million. But the question is, did you have a chance to go play post-college? Can you play overseas? Can you play in the NBA? Will this change do that? And I think that these conversations aren't being had. And to be honest, folks, we're probably the only individuals, although we're there to help them with their mental performance and their mental health, we may be the only individuals who can sit and speak to them in a way that's not about how we benefit from what decision they make. They're going to have individuals around them, good, bad, and indifferent, but the sports psychology consultant, the sports psychologist, the mental health professional can be the one that can say, hey, let's take a step back and look at what we're doing. So we're going to get into a little discussion in a moment, and it's going to be based around the psychological impact of NIL, on transfer athletes, strategies for managing stress, external pressure, and identity shifts, best practices for sports psychology professionals and guiding athlete decision making. So we're going to talk right now about personal perspectives and awareness. So what we're going to do is there's an article, and we're going to pose this question. I'm going to pose this question to the group. And this article is based on a study that discusses how NIL affects athlete identity and decision making. The question I pose to the group, and there is an answer, but we'll talk about it together, is how do you think NIL opportunities affect an athlete's mental health decision making? And before I put the answer up, I like to get people's feedback. How do you think NIL affects their decision making? There are no wrong answers. This is just dialogue that we want to have amongst each other. Anyone want to respond to that?
I have a thought. I think about like if there's extra pressure to maintain their deal, like if they experience like an injury of some sort, they might have that mental pressure to push through recovery and maybe come back to return to play quicker than they should, just for the sake of maintaining their deal, since sometimes they might change their lifestyle based on what deals they have. And so they must maintain, their name, image, and likeness. And so that's one thing that definitely popped up.
Right. And G, if I can just follow up on that, this is the part that we have to continue to be unbiased in our opinion of NIL. Because to Gia's point, that can be enough to say, well, that's not really a good thing for the sake of the student athlete. But as we stated, it's here, and that's an opportunity. So it's going to be on us to be able to keep that in mind. So it's not just about, hey, can you recover from your injury, but what other things are you thinking about? And hopefully developing a relationship with these student athletes that they can be honest and candid when they say, well, I'm also thinking about that too. So thank you for that, Gia. Anyone else want to share before we put the answer up that was considered coming out of the article?
I have a thought. I studied athletic identity. That was my concentration in graduate school. So I just imagine the degree of athletic identity is extraordinarily heightened. And I think you used athlete identity as you were kind of sharing the article. But I just imagine that there's a lot of positive that comes from that, like dedication, discipline, commitment. At the same time, there's a lot of detriment that can come, kind of what Gia was saying, and also just a degree of like self-worth and value, self-esteem based on performance, based on deals, based on kind of how the NIL shapes out for these athletes. So I just imagine a higher degree of, one-dimensional identity for these young people and how that can impact their mental health.
So to Nicole's point, that means that we have to be able to recognize these things that aren't just the traditional issues that athletes have been facing. It's just something new that we have to kind of explore. I appreciate that, Nicole. Anyone else want to share?
Sure, I'll share. I had a thought about the relationships that they are trying to maintain and build, especially with coaches. And they're because I studied coach athlete relationships in grad school in my dissertation and with female athletes per se, but who's to say who's pushing for their own goals, and like what you mentioned before, where we have to keep our own thoughts and our own biases. And so there's so many relationships with adults that athletes grow up with, and it's hard to talk about these struggles or these understanding of what is even going to happen if they make choice A, choice B, especially when it involves finances. Many people, they don't, it's all new. So, who's to say they are trying to, like prove something to their coach? Is their coach really there for their goals? What goals are they helping them achieve, and what are those goals? So I think that's really difficult in that sense as well. And I think what you were saying Also about we are the only people that are going to be able to ask them those questions and really pose like, what are your goals here? How do you see yourself in X amount of years, or where do you see yourself? And aside from what your coach says, or aside from who says what. So I think that's really important.
Thank you for that. This may
And
be an extreme.
wait,
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Dr.
I
Jones.
wanted to say something. What I think about it is adds a whole nother level of pressure. And also my concern for them is they get a big wad of money. Do they have anyone that helps them learn how to deal with it? Because that's one of the big problems, even at the pro level, is people get wads of money, but they don't necessarily maintain them. They go out and they spend and do a lot of extravagant things. And I would hate to see that happen to some of these kids at such young ages.
Right. I want to go to the chat really quickly. People have been making some great comments, and I'm just going to go through those. And I appreciate the feedback everyone's giving. I want to start from the last one I saw. Sloan Johnson. I think NIL make athletes more individually minded rather than team focused as well. Well, if we take that to be truth, I'm not arguing that. I think it adds another level of what we have to be doing with this next generation of athletes to say, hey, I know you got some great opportunities. I've been hearing about what's going on, but let's make sure you're not getting away from the team concept. Also, I saw a note from Rihanna Carp, and I can appreciate that. She said, I can maybe admit my own biases here, but it just makes me sad. Yeah, this is deep. This is deep because we're here as professionals. We're trying to get our groove as far as keeping people on the right track, and this whole new element comes in. But again, if you think about it, amongst entourage isn't the word I want to use, but amongst the circle of people who support these athletes, you may be the only person that has a level of integrity to say, look, I'm not in it for anything but to help you. I'm not benefiting from that. And you may be that one voice. So that's why I think it's very important that despite how you may feel about this issue, that you're able to have a broader conversation about that. So does anyone else want to share? 'Cause I was going to pull up what the quote unquote answer was to that question based on the article. Okay, let me pull that up really quick. I appreciate you guys. And what we have is the answer to that was, whenever it's ready, NIL can create added stress, anxiety, and pressure to perform. As athletes may feel the financial opportunities are tied to their success, some may struggle with the balancing of their brand and their athletic identity. Hey, you guys are right on it. You guys scored high on that. That is pretty much what everyone is somewhat shared, but you're getting an idea of what we have to deal with. Regardless of how challenging it may be, let's start to prepare ourselves for what the next challenges may be going forward. And I think that's going to make all of us better suited to serve the next generation of athletes. Now we'll talk about the role of sports psychology professionals. What should be the primary role of a sports psychology professional when guiding athletes through the NIL related decisions? The highlight of this article is how sports psychology professionals help athletes navigate pressure related to NIL and the transfer portal. Again, what should be the primary role of a sports psychology professional when guiding athletes throughout these NIL decisions? What do you guys think about that? What should be the primary role? As we think about that, I see Carolyn Dave. I'm sorry, go ahead. Who is that?
Oh, I'm sorry, this is Dr. Marina. I would say that the role depends on what the athlete is going through. I feel like it almost like oh gosh, I forget the supervision model, but there's a supervision model, and ASP has a version of this as well, right? Where you're sort of transitioning between a role of consultant, you're in a role of mentor, you might be in a role of teaching, and so you might be doing a combination of all three. So I would think that it would greatly depend on what the athlete needs in the moment, their concerns, and then throughout the process, like you might be filling sort of these different roles, depending what the athlete needs and what resources they already have at their disposal, right? Like some athletes might have parents who are very involved in mentorship and it's positive. Other athletes might have no guidance from anyone whatsoever. So that's just my 2 cents.
I want to follow up with that. Carolyn Davis made two comments. She also kind of gave you a big supportive statement. She said, we also have to address the cultural and athletic identity of NIL and how it plays for the athlete and the community they come from. She also said, exactly, Marina, it must depend on the athlete's need and identify concerns. Let me add this part too. This is when I'm putting my business hat on and talking about like the Chamber of Commerce talking points. An athlete can get an NIL deal from a rural community. It can be a small one-stop like town that has two or three car dealerships or one family dealership that comes together and puts a deal together for a young person. An NIL deal, collegiate and high school, can be a burger deal. So it's not always a six-figure deal. It can sometimes just be if you win tonight, you come by, you get a hamburger, you go on social media. And this is what I've gotten as feedback as far as from compliance officers on a collegiate level. So I don't want you guys to think that NIL means huge six-figure opportunity. It can also be very minute. So there's still going to be different kind of opportunities. Another reason why I think it's important that we can navigate and support this is because we want our high school level athletes to be ready when they get to college. We want them to have a little bit of experience in doing that. And what you don't want is to say, oh, we don't recruit kids from Michigan because they're not ready when they get on campus. I'm taking Michigan on the head. One other thing, too, Dr. Carolyn says, MSU was the first school to give an NIL deal to all its student athletes. They were small but impactful to show support. Yeah, some of those student athletes were some of my clients. They talked about how they paid rent and how these things were very significant. So to Marina's point, I think it's very important to know the needs. I appreciate this feedback. Does anyone else want to share on this topic? Okay, good job, guys. We're rolling. I'm going to go back to our next one. I'm going to get the formal answer from that, and that was the answer was a professional should focus on helping athletes manage stress, make value-based decisions, and maintain their mental well-being by balancing demands. I like that. Hey, I'm here to help you manage the stress. I'm not here to tell you should get the deal or not, but I'm helping you manage that. And what tools do you have in place? Also, let's go back to our original values. Many, I'm sure, when you first sat down with athletes, you kind of set some things up where they shared what was important to them and also reminded them to bring them back. And to your point, right, it may be family members or other individuals that are getting them off that. And you're the one to say, hey, remember when we first sat down, you said it was important for you to get your degree. It was important for you to accomplish this. So it may be on you to do those things. Very good, guys. I appreciate it. So the next is ethical considerations and challenges. If Dr. Karoulis was here, I know she'll be all over this with her new appointment to the ethics board with AASP. What ethical concerns arise when advising high school and college athletes on NIL opportunities? This article is based on discussing the ethical dilemmas professionals face in NIL consulting. Again, what ethical concerns arise when advising high school and college athletes on NIL opportunities? What are your thoughts on that, guys? The ethical issues that come up. So don't tell me this group throws ethics out the window. I know that's not the case.
Not at all.
Uh-huh.
I'd say some of the ethical things would be, what if they decide to sponsor somebody like for a good amount of money, and then all of a sudden the student athlete isn't playing as well? And is the question being, is the money contingent upon the performance, or is it on the image that the person portrays, or where are your boundaries to me in terms of making it a fair deal? Because as we know, people can play really great and then they can hit a slump, and it may not be forever. But
well, performance-based NIL deals in most cases are prohibited. That's part of the language on the high school level and collegiate. And I think I'm glad you brought that up because that was the first thing I thought, wow, if you score 20, you get this. So they can't relate it to that. However, I pose this question, and I think Dr. Carolyn made a point, said this is when it gets tricky. What if someone comes to you as the conduit? Oh, Dan, I know you know this guy. Dr. O'Connor, I know you know this young man. Hey, tell him we got a great opportunity. As a matter of fact, if they do this deal, we got something in it for you.
Well,
whoa,
as a licensed clinical psychologist, first of all, I couldn't, unless the the athlete gave me permission, I couldn't even admit I was seeing them, first of all. And secondly, it's a conflict of interest because you're not involved in, as a as a licensed clinician, I shouldn't be involved in any kind of financial considerations that the student is involved in. That should not be my role at all.
Right.
And this is the licensed clinical people in particular.
Dr. Carroll's
Yeah.
making a comment, said not so much for the clinicians working with them, but for the other folks in their circle who often speak, represent on their behalf. Very good. Dr. O'Connor, were you raising your hand?
Yeah, I was just going to jump in with what Joan was saying. I was even taking
Please.
it a step back that if the athlete is coming in and they want help with the decision making and they present it like a psychological issue, I have to be sure to stay in my lane and not turn into a financial consultant. It's like maybe help with the process, but much like when you get an athlete that the sport, you can't turn into a coach. You got to stay in the mental aspect of it. I think that'd be one thing that I'd be careful of is not trying to give advice on that aspect and stay in my lane.
That's so good to hear because this is ever evolving. So what was normal, there's a new normal. So I can appreciate Dr. Jones and Dr. O'Connor being able to share that. Very good. Anyone else have anything to add on that as it relates to ethical concerns?
I think I would just piggyback too. There was a comment from Dr. Marina on like dual relationships, and I think what Dr. Eddie was just saying too in regards to like dual relationships or not wearing two hats, Lindsay, like you were proposing that kind of hypothetical situation of if someone were to approach us and say, hey, we have this, like it's not my place to go to my athlete and be like, hey, this guy has a really great deal for us. Let's talk about how like it's absolutely off the table. But one thing that really just comes to mind over and over again that was kind of touched upon too is just the values of what the client is in their foundation. Because in my head, when I think of ethics, like I think my very first priority is just to make sure that the client is doing well. Like, what am I doing as the consultant, coach, mentor, to make sure that my client is doing well? And if I'm seeing whether it's NIL deal or whatever it is that's taking them either off their game mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, any of the things, that's my first ethical concern is, am I taking everything into consideration to make sure my client is doing okay? That anything else, like whatever it is. And I think this NIL conversation is just so important because it does add just such an incredible amount of pressure in so many contexts. So I appreciate this conversation so much.
Well,
I'm
I
glad.
want to make a comment to Rihanna. I think you brought up a really important issue in the fact of that neither Dr. Connor and I exactly said, but it's that whole dual relationship that is not appropriate. And as Dr. Addy said, it is appropriate to kind of help them process that, but not to make the final decision. They have to do that elsewhere. And so that we have to be really careful. And I think it's tricky working with athletes anyhow, because people try to put us in a dual role. And like I said, if an athlete doesn't give me permission that I'm to talk to somebody, that I'm seeing them, I can only help them with the process and nothing else, and not work with the coaches or anything. So
That's great. That's great. I'm glad that we're able to put that out there and it's just a healthy reminder. You guys are doing awesome, by the way. I appreciate the feedback. Let's get back to it. So, along with what you all have shared, this is what was stated in the article. Professionals must avoid conflicts of interest, ensure the athlete's mental health remains a priority, and guide them toward making informed decisions rather than being influenced by financial incentive alone. You would have think that you guys wrote this article with having the same exact response. Let's talk about long-term athlete development. I love this continuum from active start to fundamentals, learn to train, train to train, train to compete, train to win, and active for life. We love that part too. We all can be involved. So, how can sports psychologists help athletes separate their self-worth from NIL earnings or social media popularity? This article talks about how external pressures can lead to burnout and stress. Again, I repeat the question. How can sports psychologists help athletes separate their self-worth from NIL earnings and social media popularity? What do you guys think about that question right there. My likes are going down. I'm not getting any new followers on my social media platforms. My NIL value, I think open source, I forget the name of it, but they actually can help. Was it On3? They can help kind of give you a value of what your NIL may be. I mean, all these other things that come into play. We're not talking about statistics. We're not talking about how many free throws you hit. We're not talking about how you did in your gymnastics. We're talking about all these other things that in many cases, it would take someone like Tom Izzo to spit when he hears you talking about social media, but it is a factor. So how do we respond to that when we have a question about self-worth or we see that going on? Does anyone want to share?
I think the big part there just ties back to identity. You know, you you are an athlete, certainly, right? That might be one of the big bubbles. I love having my athletes draw all their identities represented by circles or bubbles or whatever, and the size of it in the moment is sort of what they feel and think. But like tying it into the other pieces that make them up as well, right? Because no one is just one identity. Certainly, the NIL deals and money and the stats and the external sort of accolades, they boost some of those things up. And when we're not getting those can make us, kind of feel that self-worth going down a bit. But that's certainly the spot where I circle back around identity and tying it into their values.
So Dan, you're saying that when you see your athlete either drifting or becoming an issue, you go back to the original core values that you talked about.
Dive back into the values, and then we dive back into their original sort of identity model that they drew for me, and tying those things back in and understanding that stats aren't a representation of you as a person; they're one performance.
Right. And to Dan's point, that's important because again, the sports psychology professional may be the only one in their circle who can bring them back to that. Because other people may be saying, "Look, man, look what's going on your social media or all these other things." I appreciate that. Does anyone else want to share?
I think it's just also like very simply in a way, it's just like who do you value listening to? Is it the masses on a screen, or is it the people around you? Is it what you say about yourself? And
Well, depending on
so
what they're saying about me, Mike, when they're
yeah,
saying
no, I hear
attaboy.
that. I hear that. As fast as they'll bring you
Right.
up, they'll want to tear you down.
Okay, that's good. That's really good. Yeah, you gotta hear from Dan as well. Okay, guys, we'll get back to this. Things are going really good. We're doing great with time too. And so what we have here is shows how external pressures can lead to burnout and stress. We talked about that, and the answer was they can encourage mindfulness, resilience, and intrinsic motivation by helping athletes focus on long-term goals and their athletic performance rather than external validation. So Dan's point, let's go back to what you say you wanted to do to begin with. What was important? And also talking about incorporating mindfulness, which I'm sure is a part of everyone's toolkit going forward. Now we have the broader impact on amateur sports. And what we have here is the AASP Mental Health Continuum. I think it's good to recognize that. Such a great resource AASP has provided. So this article addresses the role of support systems in managing mental health. What can sports psychology professionals do to educate families, coaches, and school administrators about the mental health aspects of NIL? What's your guys' take on that? What can we do? Outside of this group, our tribal connection and what we're doing, but what else can we do to help people kind of take pieces of what we're discussing now and do something with it? You guys are thinking, you're stirring.
I have a thought. So something that's come to my attention is as NIL has gone even heavier in the high school model, you see this pattern of sort of like, you think he called it the entourage or the circle, the inner circle of people around an athlete and how many people have a vested interest in a specific outcome, namely their ability, the athlete's ability to make them money. And I think that that's a really important part of the public information aspect of our work is being able to help athletes understand that someone in a sports psychology capacity who is invited into that inner circle can help protect from the pulling and pushing that goes around, because you exist as the neutral party, as you've mentioned. And I think there is some education that athletes would benefit from, to understand, hey, all these people want something from you. Do you have someone in your circle who is there for you, to remind you of your values, to remind you of your priorities, and help direct you in some of these big decisions? To normalize that as, hey, if you're building a circle around yourself, a sports psychology professional should be included. I think that as this evolves, that could be something we can push as a group.
Hannah, if I could stay with that, I'm reminded, and you all probably can get this too, is that the question is, who hired you? If you're hired by the team, the obligation is to the team. If you're hired by the individual, and this is what I say to individuals who are like getting guys who may be going to the draft, like, you will hire a trainer. We already know this, right? You'll hire, a chef, but you don't have a mental health advocate there for you who can go talk to a GM or who can advocate on your behalf. So I think it's important, Hannah, to your point, that probably part of the education can be, well, who do you have in your circle that can say no and won't be negatively affected by it? Because cousins, uncles, friends saying no can cut them off, right? So can that sports psychology professional be the individual who stand alone saying, listen, I'm here just to give advice for what's for your well-being. So I think that's really important. Dr. Carolyn says, yes, the question is always, who is the client? This guides us how we need to approach and doing the work regardless. I think that's a question we always have to pose. Doing really good with that. We got a few more. Anyone else want to share on that? Outstanding. Thank you for that, Hannah. And the response was, they can provide workshops, develop educational resources, and facilitate discussions that would focus on psychological well-being of athletes and NIL decision making. That can be a conversation you can have. Say, hey, let's just have this broad conversation of what do you guys think can be done. So this concludes the formal part, but I always talk about this at the end of any presentation. I talk about the Phoenix and how this can be your Phoenix moment. The Phoenix was a mythical creature, they said, that lived between 500 to 12,000 years. And when the Phoenix life was coming to an end, what did it do? It would go into the mountains, it would make a nest, and it would burn itself, and it would rise from the ashes. So up until now, if you had a limited familiarity with NIL on a high school and collegiate level, this is your Phoenix moment. This is your moment where you can feel a little bit more engaged. You can feel a little bit more knowledgeable and empowered as it relates to having these discussions and the role that you can play. It's going to be an ongoing conversation, as you guys may well know, but I love to be able to answer any questions that you guys have right now, and also make another request for you to submit your abstract. And finally, here's some work that I'm doing this summer, fall, and winter. I'll be with athletes this summer at the Moneyball Pro-Am, covering Michigan State football in the fall, and Michigan State basketball will continue to go on as well in Detroit Mercy. And you can get my information here, or if you reach out to me via email, I'll be happy to help. I'm going to be traveling in the state of Michigan, talking to Chamber of Commerce's, talking to Rotary clubs, talking to all kind of groups about this topic, and looking to be a resource. So, wow, guys, we're right at an hour. Thank you, so. What a great group. What great feedback. Does anyone have any final thoughts or questions they may want to share? See you, Dr. O'Connor. I know you got to go. Appreciate you. Go 23. Okay. Well, you guys have been great. I look forward to being a great resource. Hopefully, we don't have to go every year before we see everyone. And again, if you have any questions, anything from me, I'm going to put my email in the chat as well. I want to thank Dr. Michelle Caroulis in her absence for helping set this up. And that's all I have. If you guys don't have anything, everybody's good. Okay, so everyone in really warm weather, I'm kind of mad at you, but go back and enjoy that warm weather. And if your weather's not too warm, just bundle up, okay? Thank you guys so much. Have a great time. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Mhm.